An accident? No. Choice. I whispered these words to myself the very moment I stepped out of my own front door, suitcase in hand, telling her I was heading to Virginia to see my ailing mother. An excuse so ordinary it barely registered in my throat. I handed her that lie and watched her accept it with a faint nod, the relief in her eyes as plain as sunlight. She did not cry or protest or rush to help me pack. Instead, she kissed my cheek in a distant, almost performative way, and I pretended not to notice that, in truth, her lips barely grazed my skin. The numbness came first. No trembling, no racing pulse, no flood of tears. It felt like an out-of-body observation, as though I was watching someone else's life unfold. I had planned this exit, measured every piece. I waited for the surge of pain in my chest, waited for it to claw at me, to demand explanation or release. But it didn't arrive. Not right away. Instead, I felt hollow, like a silent corridor with every door locked. I drove off and circled the block, parked on a side street so she couldn't see me if she glanced out the window. Then I turned everything off. Phone volume, car engine, even the overhead light in the cabin. For a moment, I just sat there in the dark, a quiet spectator of my own marriage. Virginia. There was no trip. No mother in distress. It was a stage ruse, a neat cover for my true purpose, to confirm the final, undeniable truth of her betrayal. I couldn't quite say when I first felt her slipping away. Maybe it was a year or two ago. She was absent more often, eyes flicking to her phone with a subtle, secretive smile. At night, she turned her back to me in bed, saying she was too tired, that she needed more rest. It made sense. She's a freelancer in marketing, always grappling with deadlines, working at odd hours. I accepted that explanation at first. But gradually, subtle changes. A new perfume she never wore for me. An excited flush on her cheeks when she'd head out to meet a client. Caught my attention. My gut told me something was off, and I started noticing the telltale signs of a woman who has found excitement somewhere else. But I never called her out. For months, I only observed, a detective in my own home, taking note of every half-truth, every late-night text, every instant she came home, breathless and hurried, offering forced excuses about traffic or an extra meeting. I wanted to prove myself wrong, to discover I was merely paranoid. But the facts piled up like silent stones, forming an impassable wall. I told her my mother was sick, that I had to drive several hours to help with hospital paperwork. She nodded, pressed her lips together as if trying to appear appropriately concerned. Then that flash of relief. There it was again. If I had any lingering doubt, that single expression crushed it. She wanted me gone. She needed me away to feel safe in her secret life. So, there I was, staking out my own house. The first night passed in quiet tension. I kept expecting a car to pull up, or the glow of headlights slicing across the dark. But nothing happened. She turned off the living room light at around 10. My entire body vibrated with the hope and dread that maybe I was mistaken, maybe there was no lover. Hours ticked by. I dozed in the driver's seat, waking every 30 minutes in a disoriented jolt. Morning came with a dull ache in my neck. She left the house around 8 in her usual business casual outfit, tailored pants, a soft blouse, hair lightly styled, minimal makeup. Just enough to impress a client or a lover, I thought bitterly. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't notice me. Why would she even look for my car? I was supposed to be states away, so she drove off, and I wondered if I should follow her. But that was not my plan. I wanted proof she couldn't deny, proof that would tear down the last illusions. I spent the day in a cheap motel not far from home, a place so bland and impersonal that I could stay invisible. The second night, I returned to my parked position. I watched the windows. I studied shadows. But once again, no sign of him. At least, not in person. Something in me churned. Maybe she knew I was suspicious, so she was cautious. Or maybe he wasn't local. And then the third night arrived, an endless stretch of hours under a black sky that felt as though it was pressing down on my roof. Everything changed when I saw her bedroom lamp flick on. Around midnight, I was half asleep, but I caught the golden glow through the thin curtains. My heart pounded as if I'd been injected with adrenaline. Moments later, I glimpsed her silhouette crossing the room. She was holding her phone against her ear, or perhaps using a video call. At first, I couldn't discern anything beyond the shape of her shoulders. But then she spoke, softly, though the exact words were muffled. My ears strained, longing to catch every single breath or whisper. She ended that call quickly, but soon after, a new sound in the night. A beep from her phone notifications. I stared through the windshield, my throat feeling raw. Something inside me braced for impact, like a soldier hearing the distant rumble of artillery. Then I saw her lift her phone again. This time, her posture shifted. Her hand went to her mouth, covering her lips in shock, or maybe excitement. She tapped something, probably playing a voice message. Her shoulders tensed, then relaxed, an almost languid motion. A shiver ran through me because I knew with absolute certainty that the voice on the other end did not belong to a coworker. That was the moment I realized. It's real. It's not just suspicion. She has him, and she's not even trembling with guilt. She's thrilled. She's radiant in that light, backlit by the soft glow of the bedroom lamp, as though she's waiting for more. God, how that thought suffocated me. I don't know how many minutes passed as I watched her. She didn't move from that spot. It looked as if she were replaying the voice note again and again. Then, as if on cue, my own phone buzzed in my pocket, though I had set it to silent mode. A slight tremor alerted me to a new message. Carefully, I pulled it out, the screen's glow lighting up the darkness in the car. It was her. A voice message arrived in our shared WhatsApp chat. My stomach clenched. For a split second, I thought maybe she discovered me. But no, this message was short, a slip of the finger. The file was the same size as the one she had just listened to. My blood froze. She must have tried to forward something to him and accidentally sent it to me as well. I stared at that notification for what felt like an eternity, 1,000 scenarios flooding my head. Did she realize her mistake? Would she delete it before I listened? My finger hovered over the play button, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might tear through my chest. Then, with a steadiness I didn't know I possessed, I tapped play. His voice. Low, intimate, breathless. I still feel your hands on me. The words sank into my eardrums like a bullet. It was painfully explicit in its simplicity, revealing more than any photograph or text exchange could. I felt a violent surge deep in my core. Jealousy, betrayal, pain. This was it. Confirmation beyond denial. She had touched him, left an imprint on his body, and he longed for it again. I raised my eyes to see her upstairs, and at that same moment, I noticed her phone light up. She must have realized the message was delivered to me. Instantly, I saw her posture jerk, her shoulders rise in panic. She lunged for her phone. Too late. I was already stepping out of my car, phone in hand, heart a blazing furnace. The numbness evaporated, replaced by a roaring fury. Time slowed. My footsteps felt heavy, each one a drumbeat driving me toward the front door. I had no plan other than to confront her with the voice note, to let her see my face in that exact moment. The rest, I would figure out once I was inside. She must have heard my key in the lock, because the door flung open before I touched the knob. There she stood, wearing a loose t-shirt, mine, ironically, her hair messy, eyes wide in terror. In an instant, her cheeks went pale. She looked at me with such guilt, such raw fear, that it almost twisted my anger into pity. Almost, but not quite. Michael? What? I thought you. She swallowed hard, searching for an explanation. Why aren't you? I said nothing, only stared. Her phone was still in her right hand. The screen was on. She was probably about to delete the message and pretend it never existed. My gaze dropped to her phone, and she followed that glance. A flicker of recognition passed across her face. "Let me explain," she started, stepping aside as I entered. She hovered near me as if she might place a consoling hand on my arm. But I stepped back, refusing her touch. My head was throbbing with an onslaught of conflicting impulses, to scream, to cry, to throw something. Instead, I forced my voice out, low and controlled. "Explain what? How you touched him? How he still feels your hands on his body? Or should we talk about the nights you told me you were too tired, but somehow you found energy for him?" She winced as if slapped. "It was a mistake. I never wanted to." I raised my hand, silencing her. "Don't insult me by pretending this was an accident. You had all the time in the world to make other choices. You chose this." She opened her mouth, closed it again. Desperation flickered in her eyes. I could see tears forming. I'm sorry," she stammered. "It's not what you think." I felt alone, neglected. "You're so busy with your job, with your own goals. You needed to sleep with someone else." I spat the words, bitterness seeping into every syllable. "Right." She wrapped her arms around herself, as though cold. "You have no idea how distant you've been. I tried talking. You tried, I ignored. So you found comfort in his bed. Or maybe it was a fancy hotel. Where did it happen, Emily?" My voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Was it that motel near the highway? Or maybe you used our bed?" My eyes flickered to the stairs leading to the bedroom. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. She shook her head vehemently. "Never here. I wouldn't. I'd never." Her words fragmented in a panicked rush, as though she understood what a final blow that would be. A silence fell, thick and suffocating. I realized my hand was trembling where I held my phone. I wanted to break something, to smash this phone that carried the cursed message. But then, an odd calm slid over me, like stepping onto a frozen lake. I inhaled deeply, feeling my lungs expand, and exhaled the last remnants of my confusion. I remembered the plan I'd arranged the day before. In my moment of darkest realization, I had called a service, an actor for hire, a man who could play any role I needed him to, no questions asked, paid in cash. Maybe it was a reckless idea, maybe a stroke of madness. But I was done waiting, done letting her run the narrative. If she wanted a new life, let her have it. She was still talking, some muddled attempt at justification or apology. I let her voice pass through me without registering. Instead, I stepped aside, opened the front door fully, and gestured to the man standing behind me, in the shadows of the porch light. Dark suit, polished shoes, a professional grin that never quite reached his eyes. The actor I'd hired just yesterday. Her eyes shot wide. "W. Who is that?" she asked, voice wavering. The color drained from her face, and her posture sagged as if her knees might give out. I calmly turned to him, extended my caring. "Come in," I said softly. Then, to her, "He's the new owner." She blinked, uncomprehending. "Michael, what are you talking about?" He stepped into the house with a confident stride, slid his arm around her shoulders like he'd known her for years, and said in a gentle, almost affectionate tone, "Hey, sweetheart. Welcome to our home." A strangled sound escaped her throat. She tried to pull away, but he only tightened his hold slightly, in a show of intimate closeness. "I'll have the new sofa delivered," he continued, keeping his gaze on me. "We're getting rid of that old couch, right, honey?" She stared at him, horror etched into every line of her features. "Michael, this isn't funny. Who the hell is he?" Her voice cracked in disbelief, tears threatening to erupt. All the while, I watched from a small distance, arms folded over my chest. I felt a perverse, twisted sense of serenity. Inside, I was shattered, but on the surface, I projected a calm acceptance. This was my final goodbye to a life that once held meaning for me. "His name doesn't matter," I said, "but he's here to take my place in this house. Because I'm done. I reached into my jacket pocket, retrieving a sealed envelope. These are the divorce papers, already signed. Everything's in there. Financial terms, property settlement, the works. My signature is fresh. All that's missing is yours. She tore herself out of the actor's grip. You can't be serious, she whispered, voice shaking. We can work through this. Go to counseling. No, I replied, stepping up and setting the envelope on the table near the couch. That's not an option anymore. It might have been once if you'd come to me, if you tried to speak honestly before you decided to share your body and secrets with him. But you made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Her eyes darted to the actor, then back to me. She was visibly trembling, tears trickling down her cheeks. Please, we can talk without involving strangers. She reached a hand toward me, and for a split second, the memory of the woman I loved flickered there, the warmth, the softness. But then I recalled that voice message, those words echoing in my head, I still feel your hands on me. My jaw clenched, and I brushed her hand aside. I'm giving you exactly what you want, I said. Your freedom, my absence, and no illusions left between us. The man in the suit took a casual stroll around the living room. It's nice, he commented, running a hand along the back of our old couch. But definitely needs a modern touch. He was good. He sounded half convinced he owned the place, just as I'd instructed. He spoke with a casual confidence, as if they were already a couple, living together. She sank into a near hysterical state, face wet with tears, but no sob would fully form. Michael, stop this, she pleaded. You don't have to do this. We can fix it. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I studied her for a long moment, letting the silence crush the air between us. I wanted her to feel the weight of everything. All the nights I'd lain awake, suspecting. All the times I'd felt her pull away from me. All the humiliations I'd swallowed. My voice emerged in a low rasp. I'm not yelling. I'm not throwing things. I'm not calling you every foul name in the book, because that would only show how much I still care. I exhaled, a bitter laugh in my throat. The truth is, Emily, you did break me. But in that destruction, I realized I can survive. And I no longer feel the need to hold on to something that only brings me pain. She looked stricken, as though drowning, eyes desperately searching my face for mercy. But I was beyond that. I turned, gave the actor a nod. Lock up after you're done. You have the keys. He slipped the keys into his pocket with a professional smile. Of course, he replied. Then, turning to her, Sweetheart, why don't you show me around the rest of the house? We can decide what to keep, what to replace, especially that bedroom upstairs. I've got some ideas. She gasped at the mention of the bedroom, her composure threatening to snap entirely. Her eyes darted to me, flickering with horror. I offered no solace. My silence was the final betrayal of the love we once shared. I walked to the door, each step a statement of my release. She called my name, voice cracking. I kept going, crossing the threshold, pulling the door shut behind me. The last thing I heard was her ragged breath, half sob, half plea. Michael, don't. But I did. I left. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool on my face, and for a moment I closed my eyes. My heart still pounded, but in that pounding there was a strange sense of relief. The final blow had been dealt. The confrontation had happened, and though I felt a raging swirl of anger, betrayal, heartbreak, the strongest sensation was a grim, hollow calm. I was free of her deception. I got in my car and just sat there for a moment. My body shook, adrenaline leaving me limp. In the quiet darkness, it finally came, the delayed pain. It radiated outward, flooding every fiber of me like a tidal wave. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Instead, I let out a shallow, shaky exhale, then a second. My mind replayed the scene, her white face, the tears, the trembling hand extended toward me. That final, miserable wreckage of all we once had. I forced myself to start the engine. If I lingered, I might cave, might do something foolish like burst back inside, and let her talk me into some half-baked attempt at reconciliation. No, I'd planned my exit. I delivered my blow. It was over. I drove aimlessly for a while, passing street after street, not even registering the route. My mind was an echo chamber of her betrayal. I saw the lover's face, or at least conjured an image of him. Tall, confident, with that easy charm she once said she loved in me. I imagined them meeting in a hotel, her breathy laughter, his hand sliding around her waist. That single voice message told me everything. The closeness of flesh, the unmistakable fire of shared intimacy. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. Hours later, I ended up outside a 24-hour diner. Neon lights buzzed. The place was nearly empty. I went in, found a corner booth, and ordered black coffee. The waitress, a weary-looking woman in her 60s, recognized my hollow stare. She didn't ask questions, just refilled my cup whenever I drained it. Time slowed in that diner. I recalled her eyes from years ago, how they sparkled when I first asked her to move in with me. The nights we cooked together in that same kitchen I'd just abandoned. The night we danced barefoot on our hardwood floor, celebrating some small victory at my job. I wondered, how did we get here? How does love decay into betrayal so easily? No, it's never easy. It's a series of small decisions, cracks forming in the foundation until everything collapses under its own weight. Maybe I missed the cracks. Maybe I contributed to them by being too consumed with work, too comfortable in routine. But it doesn't excuse her stepping into another man's arms without a single attempt to fix us. She'd stolen our marriage from me, replaced it with illusions and secrets. I swallowed the bitterness with every sip of scalding coffee. By dawn, a bleak light crept through the diner windows. My eyes felt gritty, my brain a swirl of exhaustion. The waitress gave me a sympathetic look as I finally stood to leave, paying for the coffee I barely tasted. "Take care, Han," she murmured. Outside, the pale sky offered no answers, but it felt oddly fresh. Something inside me had cracked wide open. I was done living under illusions. The calm that settled over me then was different than before. It was acceptance, maybe, or the start of it. I realized I had to push forward, had to figure out who I was outside that marriage. I found myself renting another cheap motel room for the next few nights, sorting through the avalanche of practical details. Calls with my attorney, messages from coworkers who wondered why I was on emergency leave. I told them all that I needed a few days to handle personal matters. My mind flickered to my actual mother. She was fine, probably at home in Pittsburgh, unaware of the lie I'd used about her being sick. I should call her eventually, but I couldn't face that conversation yet. On the second day after leaving the house, my phone buzzed repeatedly with her calls. I let them go to voicemail. At first, she left trembling, desperate messages. "Michael, please, just talk to me. We can fix this. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." The next wave was more frantic, with a sharper edge. "Why are you doing this? You can't just throw away 10 years. Answer me." Then, inevitably, the tone turned to anger. "I'll fight these divorce papers if that's what you want. I can ruin you in court if you push me." But her empty threat rang hollow. We both knew that legally I had all the evidence I needed if it ever went that far. I turned off the phone, taking a savage satisfaction in the silence. Over the next few days, I occasionally turned it on to check messages from work, ignoring hers. The actor texted me once, "All good on my end. Let me know if you need more." I never responded. His job was done. He planted the final seed of devastation in her mind. Now it was her turn to stare at that new reality. My nights were restless. Sometimes, images of them together flickered behind my eyelids, her nails trailing down his back, the soft moan of her breath in his ear. I'd wake up with a pounding heart, half choking on my own bitterness, But no matter how vivid those nightmares, I refused to let them break me further. Because each time I woke, I remembered that I was free of lies. No more illusions, just the raw, honest truth. She betrayed me, and I was stepping away. If that meant I had to rebuild my life from scratch, so be it. One morning, about a week after I left the house, I decided it was time to talk to an attorney in person. My friend recommended a reputable law office. Sitting in that polished, sterile space, I felt an odd sense of pride, like I was handling a business transaction, not dismantling a decade of marriage. The lawyer asked me about details, property, joint accounts, any possibility of reconciliation. I stated in no uncertain terms that reconciliation was off the table. She'd cheated. I was done. The lawyer nodded briskly. She'd seen it all before. She assured me the process could be straightforward if my wife cooperated. Otherwise, it might drag out. I left the office with a stack of paperwork in my briefcase and a heaviness in my gut. Even with all my rage, the reality of dividing everything we built, both the tangible and the intangible, tasted like defeat. 10 years of shared memories, friends, financial intertwinings. Untangling it was a grim necessity, like cutting away a rotting limb to save the body. Days passed. I found a small furnished apartment for a short-term lease. It was barely more than a studio, but it offered the anonymity I craved. I spent my evenings there, quietly sifting through old emails, old photographs on my laptop. My ring finger felt naked. I'd slipped off my wedding band at night I walked out. It lay in a drawer now, next to the battered watch I used to wear daily. Sometimes I'd hold that ring between thumb and forefinger, marveling at how small and cheap it looked without the glow of sentiment. Just metal, nothing more. She kept trying to contact me. She left me voicemails that teetered between pleading and fury. But I refused to engage. I had told her everything she needed to know. I was out. If she wanted to sign the papers, she knew where to send them. If she wanted to fight, then I would see her in court. It was that simple, that cold. One night, out of the blue, the phone rang. Something in me compelled me to pick up. Maybe it was the name on the screen. Emily, I answered, not speaking first, just breathing into the receiver. I heard her trembling exhale on the other end. You picked up, she said, her voice quiet. God, Michael. I didn't think you would. Silence. My heart thudded heavily. I noticed my reflection in the apartment window. Dull eyes, lines of exhaustion etched across my face. Please, she whispered, I want to say something, and then you can hang up if you want. No more arguments. I stared at the darkness outside. Go ahead. She took a shaky breath. I'm signing the papers. I know I messed up. I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I need you to know, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. I can't explain it. Maybe it was boredom, or a need for excitement, or 1,000 other reasons that don't matter anymore. But I'm sorry. If I could take it back, you can't. I interrupted, my voice low. You made your choices. I just wish you'd have come to me. Told me you needed more. Maybe we could have tried. Or maybe it would have ended anyway. But at least we would have had honesty. I heard her sniffle. I know. I'm so sorry. Please believe that. Is he still around? I asked, unable to hide the cynicism in my tone. Your new companion? Or was it just some fling? She paused. No, he's gone. It fell apart the minute you confronted me. It wasn't real, Michael. Not the way I thought it was. I guess I was chasing something that never existed. I inhaled slowly. Some small part of me took grim satisfaction in hearing that, but it didn't erase what she'd done. I'll have my lawyer finalize everything once you send back the signed copies, I said. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. I waited, half expecting her to beg again, to try and salvage some piece of us. But she didn't. Maybe she realized the futility. Or maybe she was just as tired as I was. Finally, I ended the call with a curt goodbye. Afterward, I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time. A dull ache pounded behind my temples. I was moving forward, step by step, but the shards of betrayal still embedded themselves in my chest. I wasn't sure how long it would take for me to trust anyone again, trust myself, even. But there was a faint sense of closure in her words, an acknowledgement that she'd ruined us for nothing. A few days later, I had my closure in legal form. An envelope arrived at my attorney's office, her signature neatly on every line. The end of a decade, sealed and authorized by the state. There, I thought. Done. Time drifted in strange ways after that. I went back to my routine at work. People asked if everything was okay, and I'd just say, personal stuff. I'm fine, with a tight smile. My boss noticed a hardness in me, something sharpened by anger or heartbreak, but he didn't pry. He gave me space, assigning me tasks I could tackle alone. The quiet suited me. In idle moments, I felt waves of sorrow for the good memories. I remembered how she used to tilt her head when laughing, how we huddled under a blanket on cold nights, watching old movies. The fleeting sweetness of our early years made the present bitterness all the more acute. But I let those memories flow and fade. I didn't cling to them. I told myself, that was then, this is now. Every so often, I dream of the confrontation, me thrusting the keys into the actor's hand, telling him the house was his. I'd wake up with adrenaline pounding, uncertain if I was proud or horrified at my own theatrics. Perhaps it was petty, but I recall the look on her face, the pure shock, the final realization that she had burned down our life, and I wouldn't be there to help rebuild. She got a fraction of the devastation she'd dealt me. Maybe that made me monstrous, or maybe it was simply the sting of retribution. Either way, it was done. Weeks turned into months. I settled into a new rhythm, found a slightly better apartment, and started exploring what single life could look like for a man in his 40s. It wasn't glamorous. There were lonely nights, awkward attempts at cooking for one, a sense of drifting without anchor. But gradually, I discovered a certain strength in solitude. No more double-checking my phone. No more illusions about what lay in the shared bed. Just me, forging my next chapter. I also visited my mother, who was actually quite healthy and baffled by my sudden arrival in Pittsburgh. I confessed what had happened. Her eyes filled with sorrow and anger, but she held my hand, telling me I did the right thing. Life's too short to be with someone who betrays you, son, she said, stroking my hair like I was a boy again. I felt a momentary wave of comfort. For the first time, I let a tear escape. She held me, and I let the pain surface just enough to breathe it out, feeling it recede like a tide. By the time I drove back to Virginia, I felt a shift in my chest, lighter, if not healed. The scab was still tender, but it was forming, protecting the rawness underneath. I kept to myself, focusing on work, on small daily victories. One evening, quite unexpectedly, I found a message from an old college acquaintance. She'd heard about my divorce from mutual friends and reached out, offering a simple invitation for coffee if I ever wanted to talk. I stared at that message for a good 15 minutes, uncertain how to respond. Eventually, I typed a polite acceptance. Maybe it was time I allowed a sliver of human connection back into my life. Not romance. God, I wasn't ready. But maybe a conversation that wasn't steeped in bitterness. The next morning, I went for a run. Something I'd done sporadically before, but now I found purpose in the physical exertion. As my feet pounded the pavement, I thought about how a single act of betrayal had ripped away my illusions, but also forced me to stand on my own, to confront my life with a new clarity. The cheating itself was a bullet that shattered my sense of security, but the aftermath showed me that I could endure. I ended my run outside a small park, breath steaming in the crisp air. My muscles burned, heart hammering. For a moment, I leaned on a fence, letting my gaze wander to a couple strolling along a path. They were close, arms entwined, smiles easy. I felt a pang of envy, of longing. But then it passed, replaced by acceptance. I would not race to fill the void with any random relationship. I would let time do its work, let me rebuild from within. Weeks flowed, and the final divorce decree arrived. A formality, but an official stamp that ended our legal bond. I flipped through the pages without flinching. The settlement was straightforward. She kept the house. I didn't want it anyway. Too many memories haunted those walls. I'd left it all behind with that envelope, and that hired actor, who had probably performed the strangest role of his career that night. Sometimes, in the hush before sleep, I revisit the calmness that settled over me after the confrontation. The way I didn't raise my voice, didn't break furniture, didn't degrade myself by begging. I simply let her see the cold truth. She was no longer worth my anguish. In that controlled rage, there was a shard of dignity I clung to. Strangely, I found that piece of dignity gave me more strength over time than any outburst or melodrama could have. People often say that heartbreak can drive a man insane, but for me, it was an icy clarity. The moment I heard that voice message, everything I felt for her, love, trust, devotion, withered, replaced by the steel edge of finality. Months turned into half a year, and I realized I was carrying myself differently. Shoulders squared, posture more upright. At the office, I took on projects with an almost ruthless focus, channeling all my leftover frustration into tangible results. My boss noticed my new drive. He offered me a promotion, ironically in strategic development, the same area where I once thrived before all this. I accepted with a faint smile. In quiet moments, I thought about how heartbreak doesn't vanish overnight. It leaves a bruise that can flare up when triggered by a random memory, a certain song, the mention of a place we visited together. But day by day, the bruise faded, and within that slow fade, I realized I was forging a stronger version of myself, a man who knew exactly where he stood, and what lines he would never let anyone cross again. I won't pretend the journey ended in some triumphant celebration, because real life rarely plays out that way. But I reached a place where I could look at photos of me and her without feeling my stomach knot in anguish. She was a chapter of my life, filled with love and betrayal. I learned from it. I paid for it. And in the end, I survived it. I never saw her again in person. Sometimes, I wondered if she tried to reach me in some last attempt at closure, but if she did, I never knew. I changed my number eventually, moved to a different part of town. I heard through the grapevine that she sold the house and moved away. Maybe she went chasing something else. Maybe she was just running from the ghosts in those rooms. Neither outcome truly mattered to me now. One day, about a year after I walked out that door for good, I found myself standing on a quiet riverbank near my old hometown, that place I used to visit as a kid. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. I let the serene stillness wash over me, inhaling the scent of water and damp earth. My thoughts drifted back to the man I was before I discovered her infidelity, a man who believed everything was under control. That man was gone. I felt a grim gratitude for the man who had emerged instead, a man who had faced the worst kind of personal betrayal and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. There was a difference between brokenness and transformation. She shattered the illusions, yes, but I had built something sturdier in their place, a quiet, unyielding sense of self that no one could violate again. I took a final look at the horizon, remembering her smile, her laugh, the warmth of our early love. Then I whispered a silent goodbye to it all, letting the last threads of resentment slip from my mind. In that moment, I felt more freedom than I ever had in my life. I had destroyed what was left of my illusions, and ironically, that destruction gave birth to a new sense of clarity. I turned from the water, stepping back toward my car. The sky darkened, but I didn't feel afraid of the night. I had learned that real terror comes from secrets in the daylight, from the lies of someone you love. The night was honest in comparison. Darkness was just darkness, and I could find my way through it. I opened the car door, slid inside, and sat for a moment before turning on the engine. I felt my pulse, steady and calm, my breath even. No storm raged in my head. No illusions haunted me now. I was free, free to move forward, to decide my own path, unburdened by betrayal. Even if the scars remained, they were proof of my survival, of the lessons I'd carry forward. That night, as I drove back into the city, I embraced my solitude, not as loneliness, but as a blank slate, a place to rebuild. The memory of her betrayal no longer crushed me. It had become a reminder that I had the strength to walk away, to sever ties with what harmed me. No, it wasn't a random event. It was a choice I made, a choice to reclaim my life from the ashes of a broken promise. And as I crossed the city limits, passing streetlights that glowed like silent witnesses to my thoughts, I realized that was enough. I had found my closure. I had found myself again. And I did it on my own terms.